Well, it is the evidence that led to a new trial for a wrongly convicted man. The videotape of a police interrogation that was never made public until now. Jane Flash tells us Charles Pierre claims it reveals a cover-up that forced him to serve years in prison for a double murder he did not commit.
Well, Don, this summer at a second trial, a jury did find Charles Teddy Pierre not guilty of that double murder and arson. Pierre is now suing Rochester Police and the District Attorney's Office. He says evidence that pointed to another man was covered up, and some of that is on tape. Prosecutors had sought the death penalty. Serving 4 life sentences in Attica, Charles Pierre twice thought about taking his own life.
You're telling yourself, maybe if you kill yourself, the victim's family might feel good.
While Pierre sat in prison, Kathy Boyd was racked with guilt.
I have felt that guilt because that's an innocent man who is sitting in prison for the rest of his life.
That's Boyd during a police interview in May of 2012. She lived in an apartment behind where 2 people were murdered a decade earlier. She says that very night her husband, Daryl Boyd, confessed he killed them to steal money for crack.
He goes, I did it. He goes, I killed him and I set the house on fire. He said he beat both of them up with the baseball bat.
Out of fear for her life, Kathy Boyd kept quiet. The 2012 interview came about because her husband was under investigation for another similar arson and homicide. But she says she first told police about his involvement in 2005.
I sat there and said, he murdered 2 people on First Street and got away with it. Okay. I remember his look, and he was like just begging, please don't say anything more, look.
That was during a domestic violence call. The police report backs her claim. Quote, she stated Daryl Boyd was responsible for the arson homicide.
At the very least, though, ethically, legally, morally, they should have told Mr. Pierre.
Pierre's attorney says the new evidence was not only ignored, there was an attempt during that later interrogation to cover it up.
Did you ever write any letters to Pierre?
No.
You never talked to him, never said anything?
No.
Okay.
I thought about it.
No.
It tells me that they weren't interested in the search for the truth, just like they weren't interested in the search for the truth in 2002.
Now, District Attorney Sandra Dorley tells 13 WHAM News, I'm confident in the way we handled this matter. The Rochester Police Department would not comment, but a source close to this investigation says this comment is taken out of context, that police routinely tell witnesses not to talk with anyone about what they know in order to protect the integrity of the investigation. Don?
All right. Hey, thank you, Jane.
Horrific act, you know, and their concern is like, where did these acts of violence stop?
Word tonight, the teenager charged with killing a neighbor's 4 pets is under investigation for animal cruelty involving his own pets. He is accused of crushing 2 of the neighbor's 4 pets to death and shooting up their home with a BB gun. People living on the Webster Street want to know why he has been released to the custody of his father and is not being held in a secure location. Jane Flash in the newsroom now with the answer to that, Jane.
Well, Don, the state uses this 4-question checklist to determine who is released and who has to be held. Had investigators known of that first possible animal cruelty case back when it is alleged to have occurred, it might have made a difference.
I wouldn't want anything like this to happen again. You know, and it's just got to stop.
The Meyer house is way too quiet. The constant chirping of birds, a gift to Joseph's mother from his now deceased father, is gone. Nearly every window in the back of the house carries a reminder. Damage from a BB gun shot from the neighbor's backyard. 13 holes in the bedroom window alone show an alarming level of violence.
I've known people who have kids who have had trouble with the law in the past, and for less offenses. Not even nowhere near violent, and being minors that were still incarcerated, you know, and put into juvenile detention.
The teenager was released with the condition that he be continually supervised. Meyer wants to know why he wasn't held in detention. 13 WHAM News obtained the juvenile risk assessment used by the state. The burglary charge was enough to require supervision. Anything more would have required evidence of possible petitions or warrants already pending in family court. Sources tell 13 WHAM News allegations of past abuse involving his own family dogs may have only come to light after this arrest. Dr. Santo Benavina is a psychiatrist and forensic expert in cases involving children who behave violently.
These are warning signs, and I think people have to be notified when they see these things. This is not a joke. This is not something that's going to go away without help.
The Meyers say their cat was spared only because it ran and hid in the basement. The teenager allegedly telling police he crushed their two beloved birds in his own hands.
This yard and this community are full of pets, and it's a matter just of one moment in time where he can step over that fence and have the opportunity to harm another animal.
Now, New York law does allow for juveniles as young as 13 to be charged as adults for high-level crimes. The lower-level burglary and criminal mischief crimes that the teen has been charged with here do not allow him to be considered as an adult. Don?
Now to a 13 Wham investigation. When the contractor he hired suddenly stopped work, an Ogden man went to police trying to recoup tens of thousands of dollars.
But 2.5 years later, still no money. That's when he turned to 13 Wham News. Jane Flash investigates how this happened and what's being done now.
John Gigliotti never thought building his dream home would become such a nightmare.
They took $45,000 and I had to borrow another $60,000 to get another builder to complete the house.
Gigliotti hired Cahoon Construction. A signed contract spells out an agreement to pay in increments as the work progressed. Gigliotti says his first check got him this: a cleared lot and partial foundation walls. A second payment was for framing and a roof. But Gigliotti claims in November 2012 the builder halted the work and blamed a permit snag. Emails from the town suggest otherwise.
The project may proceed. That was November, okay?
Wow,
and
okay.
he would never go back to work. They can't say that they weren't allowed on the property because there it is right in front of you.
The attorney Gigliotti originally hired to fight the town instead found something else. The down payment checks were endorsed by John Cahoon and deposited into a personal account, not an escrow account as required by law.
After a couple meetings, my lawyer told me, he goes, John, I think these guys are crooks.
We tracked Cahoon down at his Rochester home. On two separate occasions, the person inside would not answer the door. Gigliotti went to state police in March of 2013. For months, he waited with a house that still looked like this. Out of frustration, he hired a new builder and took out another loan. With $105,000 now tied up in his house, he called his state senator. In July of 2013, Senator Joe Robach called on the district attorney to obtain subpoenas state police needed to make their case.
I'm really disappointed in the district attorney's office. I see no sense of urgency. I just think this has dragged on far too long.
I certainly understand and appreciate Mr. Gigliotti's concerns and sympathize with him.
Assistant District Attorney James Egan was assigned this case back in October.
We had to subpoena and obtain certain records, talk to multiple witnesses, research certain aspects of the law, because it's a little bit more complicated theory of larceny than we typically see.
Later that same month, John E. Cahoon was arrested, charged with stealing over half of the money he was paid. The criminal investigation did not end with the arrest. 13 Wham News has learned state police turned over new subpoenaed information just last Friday, and the case is now scheduled for grand jury action. John Gigliotti has since moved into the house he paid for twice. 2.5 years later, the courts may finally be catching up with the man who he believes is responsible.
I can't say the words I want to use on camera. It's, I would have to spew a lot of profanity to tell you my frustration.
Jane Flash, 13 Wham News.
And John Cahoon pleaded not guilty to one count of grand larceny. The grand jury may consider more charges.
Yeah, and our attempts to reach Cahoon over the last month were not successful. His last known attorney did not return our request for comment. For the second day in a row, a 911 call takes center stage in the trial of Pittsford teen charged with killing his father.
911, sir. What's the address of emergency?
Yes, hi. My name is Jean Tan, and I'm at 37 Coastline. And my husband just beats me up. I need your protection.
Jean Tan, allegedly under attack by her husband calling for help. 10 days later, she called 911 again This time to report her husband had been shot to death by her son, Charlie Tan. Jane Flash, live at the Hall of Justice covering the trial, joins us now. Jane.
Well, Don, the defense says this 911 call proves a pattern of abuse inside the Tan home, but prosecutors say it proves something else, a motive for intentional murder. On January 25th, while Charlie Tan was away at school, his mother, Jean, placed a frantic call to 911.
Are you injured?
Yes, he choked me, and I'm so scared. Please, please help. Oh, you call me? No.
Later, Jim Tan gets on the line.
My name is Jim Tan.
Okay.
All right, so there's no issue here. Just my wife and myself have some arguments.
Police have been called to the Countryside Lane home 18 times since 2003.
It obviously links to a history of domestic violence in the home, and at least on that particular instance, a very serious issue of domestic violence.
But prosecutors say that 911 call was the last straw for Charlie Tan.
So this would be motive, but our theory is that information was conveyed to him about something that would make him want to kill his father.
5 days later, Charlie Tan called a high school friend and football buddy. Jacob Grossman testified Charlie asked him for money. When they met later, quote, he looked like he was crying, Grossman testified. Charlie said he'd be leaving the country tomorrow.
Was he planning to leave the country? Did he leave the country?
Don't know the answers to those. You'll have to wait and hear what comes out at the trial.
Grossman was so upset at his friend's demeanor, he called 911 to seek help for him. Deputy Steve Williams testified when he responded to the Tan home the night of the homicide call, Jim Tan's wounds were not fresh. Prosecutors say that's because Tan killed his father days earlier and point to that teary meeting he had with his high school friend.
Are you saying that's the night he shot his father?
I'm saying that that's a night that is unlike any he's had before. I think it's consistent with the time frame that's been placed in the indictment.
Now, deputies testified today. They also found business cards for attorneys in Mrs. Tan's purse. Prosecutors say that she and her son may have sought legal advice, and they say that could account for what they say is a 4-day delay in reporting Jim Tan's death. Reporting live outside the Hall of Justice, Jane Flash, 13 WHAM News.
All right, hey, thank you, Jane.
It was a packed courtroom. Police officers filed in along with family members to hear this verdict. 13 WHAM's Jane Flash is covering for us along with Kelsey Smith. We're going to start with you, Jane. What was the mood like in the courtroom?
Well, you talked about those police officers. They lined the back and side walls of the courtroom. It was standing room only there. It was perfectly silent as the jury filed in. The jury forewoman stood up and pronounced guilty to the top count of the indictment, the intentional murder of Officer Daryl Pearson. At that point, you could hear some soft crying in the courtroom. Supporters of the Pearson family letting loose some of their stress over all of this with tears. Shortly after all of the verdicts were read, we met with Daryl Pearson's father, Steve, outside the courtroom, and he too was in tears. This is what he told us.
I'm very happy for RPD, family, the community. Justice was served, and now my son can rest in peace.
Now, jurors labored 16 hours for this verdict. Many of those hours, it appeared, they were working on that top count, not in agreement with each other until coming back from lunch. After the verdict, we also talked to the Rochester police chief. Ironically, and maybe surprisingly, he went over to the defense attorneys after the verdict came in and thanked them for their service to the justice system. And this is what he told us right after that.
Any family that goes through a trauma like this is, again, a step in the closure and the healing process. We will always honor Daryl and his memory, his service, and his sacrifice. But this is a step forward, and it's a renewal of the commitment of the Rochester Police Department to protect this city and the people of this city.
And I want to talk about the third count in that indictment. The jury pronounced not guilty to that assault count, but they did come back with a guilty verdict for a lesser charge of a lesser degree of assault. So we want to clarify that right now. Sentencing, again, is set for June 30th. In the courtroom today, there was a lot of relief. Amy Pearson, however, was not in the court, but we were told that a phone call went out to her immediately.
All right, thank you, Jane.